Hey, this is Brian with ActiveMelody.com. Well, for this week's guitar lesson, we have a country blues lead. It's sort of a slow ballad. There's some western swing mix in there. There's a little bit of a jazz thing. There's some blues. It's all kind of in a big hybrid. But there's a lot of takeaways that you're going to learn or be able to pull from this lesson and apply to your playing right away. This is easy stuff. This is not super technical, so you can definitely follow along and start using it. So I've got the lesson split into two parts. In this video, we'll take a look at the first half. If you'd like to watch the second half, download the tablature, the MP3 jam tracks, which I have in multiple tempos. Get all the video content and everything for the lesson. You can get all of that by going to ActiveMelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP333. All right, so we're going to break down all the notes in this country blues lead. And this is very simple to play. This is not super technical, but don't let that fool you. There's a lot of information that you can learn in this composition that you can start to use in your own playing right away. This is very simple stuff. This is the stuff that I wish somebody would have showed me when I was learning to play guitar, and it's really hard to find because it's so overlooked, some of these little nuances that we're going to get into. And I had a hard time coming up with a title this week. I say that a lot. Because it's a hybrid of different styles. We have some western swing, which has a jazz element. There's some country, there's blues, and you put it all in a blender and you get this composition. But I love some of the old Hank Williams recordings where you hear that all those 6 chords and stuff that just have that real jazzy element, even though it's like honky-tonk country. And so that's kind of what I was wanting to work some of that into this, and so we'll get into that. But the song is played in the key of C. It's a 1-4-5 chord format, very basic chords. These are chords you already know. And it has an intro. A lot of the old country songs, country ballads would start off with an intro, and the intros were always sort of the same, roughly same format. You have the 4 chord, you go to the 1 chord, then you go to the 5 chord, and you go back to the 1 chord, and then the song starts. And that's what we're going to do. So we're starting with the 4 chord. Now the 4 chord, when we're playing in the key of C, is an F. So just so you know, the 1 chord is your C, the 4 chord is an F, and the 5 chord is a G. And we'll just leave it at that for now, but those are your 1, 4, and 5. So we're going to start with the 4 chord, which is the F, and then it goes back to the 1 chord, which is the C. Then it goes to the G, which is the 5, and then back to the 1. And then the whole thing, then the song actually starts. So that's your intro. So now, those are the chords, and I could play whatever I want over those chords. So when you listen to the jam track, you're going to hear a very stripped down, very simple bass, country bass, and then a simple drum thing. And it's your job to fill in all the space. And I love that challenge of a very stripped down jam track where you don't have a lot of places to hide. You've really got to try and complement the music. So instead of just playing an F chord and a C chord, which I could have done, I played that for the F chord. So let me show you that first. So what I'm doing is I'm thinking about your F chord down in first position, and the way that I'm making that is I'm only using the first 4 strings. So I'm borrowing the first 2 strings on the 1st fret. My middle finger is on the 2nd fret, 3rd string. My ring finger is on the 3rd fret, 4th string. And when I play that, let me back up. I'm actually borrowing the first 3 strings on the 1st fret because I start off with that hammer on. Now that's simple. It's something you can do, but let me show you all the things you can do with that. And you've probably seen me do this a lot over the E chord where I go, if I'm playing a blues, this is the same thing, but we're now using it over an F chord. We're just taking that E chord shape and sliding it up, doing the same thing. So when I play that, I'm playing a downstroke with the right hand, and then I do an upstroke on strings 1 and 2. Or if you happen to just hit the first string, that's okay too. But hit something on the way up. Now after that, I'm going to bar here with my ring finger on the 3rd fret, bar the first 4 strings, but I'm only going to play strings 4, 3, and 2. And what is that? Some of you are saying, what is that? Well, that's a B flat chord. And I know some people are going, whoa, hold on. You said there was only 3 chords in this. And there really are. It's just a C, F, and G chord. This is a modulation off of the F chord. So when you're playing this chord, so don't even think of it as an F chord or B flat. Take that out of it. Let's look at shapes. So when you're playing this shape, you can go back and forth between that shape and this shape as much as you want. And what that is that's your F chord and your B flat chord, which is the 4 chord of that F chord. So this is where it gets weird, because the F chord is the 4 chord of the key of the song we're playing, which is C. So now, in actual fact, that's the 4 chord of the 4 chord. But don't let all that get you bogged down. That's just sort of the theory behind it. All you have to know is, if you're playing this chord shape, let's move it up and play it in G. You can now modulate between the 1 and the 4 very easily, just by doing that quick bar there. And I use that all the time. I know this is probably super basic for some of you, but I'm telling you, instead of just playing a G chord now when you're strumming rhythm, you can go. And that starts to sound like the song Mystery Train. And so you start to see where all this stuff comes from. It's you hear that in so much music. So I know that's a diversion, but I thought it was important. All right, back to the song. So we're back to this F chord. We have the hammer on, the modulation to the 4 chord, and then we go back to the hammer on. And then we come back and play strings 1 and 2. Now that's what we play over the F chord. Then the song goes to the C chord. And what I played was this. So this, let's start with that. So I'm taking my ring finger and I'm sliding from the 3rd fret to the 5th fret on the 2nd string. And then I'm coming up here and playing the 3rd fret 1st string. Now what are those 2 notes? Well, those are in the C chord. Think of your C chord using the A chord shape. If you played the top part of that C chord shape, that's all covered in the Caged lesson, which is EP333. But anyway, what I'm doing there is I'm just playing those 2 notes out of that. So when I think of a C chord, I oftentimes just play this instead of playing the full chord. And especially if you have a jam track or have a band, somebody backing you up, that's going to totally make sense. So you don't have to think of a C chord like this anymore. You can think of it in these different ways, different chord shapes. And it could be 2 strings, it could be 3 strings, it doesn't have to be all 6. All right, so after that, then I came up here and played. Now what is that? This is the major scale for C. Now I'm going to show you how I think of it. I think of the major pentatonic scale. So when I think of the key of C, I picture my C chord shapes. And so I'm picturing this chord shape. I can see the bar there where my finger is making the C chord. And I know that that butts up against pattern 1 of the major pentatonic scale. Right? I can see all those notes that connect to that chord shape. Now I know that if I add 2 more notes to that, I can turn that major pentatonic scale into the major scale. There's one of the notes, and there's the other note. This is just my logic, and I realize some of you are going to say, why wouldn't you just start with the major scale? And it just depends on how you learn this stuff. When I learned to play, I learned the pentatonics first, and then I learned I can add notes to those pentatonics to make them even more powerful. And that's what we're doing. So this is just C major scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, so it comes up here to the 8th fret with my pinky, 1st string, 7th fret, and then I come down to the 5th fret and I do a hammer on back to the 7th fret and a pull off. So we have, and then I come down to the 8th fret 2nd string and then the 5th fret 2nd string. So don't just memorize those notes and how to play them, but put them in context and know, okay, those are all working over a C chord, right? Because they're in the C major scale. Then the song goes to the 5 chord, which is your G. And what I did there was play this. Now, let me show you how to play. It's easy to play. It's the 6th fret 2nd string. My index finger then goes down on the 5th fret 3rd string, back to that 6th fret 2nd string. And then while that note rings out, that 6th fret 2nd string, my index finger comes down to the 4th fret 3rd string. Like that. Now what are those notes? Remember, we're playing over the 5 chord, which is your G chord. And I was just picturing the G7 chord. That's where my pinky is up here on that 6th fret 2nd string. That's that note that's ringing out. So when I'm playing these 2 notes, those are just 2 notes out of the G7 chord. If I were to make a G7 like this and play strings 3 and 2, those same 2 notes. And you'll get better at this over time. You'll start to be able to picture chord shapes, arpeggios, and then scales, and they kind of light up. Even though you're not there yet, you instinctively kind of know where you can go. And so that's what's going on here. I pivoted right into that 5 chord. All right, and now we got to get back to the 1 chord, and I went, play just a lick that I know. Now this lick is played between the 2nd string and the 4th string. And I'm hybrid picking that. So I'm picking on the 4th string and I'm using my ring finger to pluck that 2nd string. So it starts here and both fingers are on the same fret. So I'm on the 5th fret, strings 2 and 4. Slide that down to the 4th fret and then down to the 3rd fret. And then we come down to this shape where I've got my index finger on the 1st fret 2nd string, middle finger is on the 2nd fret 4th string. So we've went from this pattern to this pattern. Now the easiest way to think about this is that's just your C chord, right? Just strings 2 and 4 out of your C chord. So that makes it really easy to grab that. Now you can picture that chord and go, oh, okay, that's where we're going. And hopefully a light bulb went off for some of you and you realize, oh, I can do that anywhere. It's not, I don't have to just do it over the C chord. I can just play off of those chord shapes. All right, so let's back up and play this intro from the beginning. Now remember, when this comes in, it doesn't come in right on the 1. It comes in on the and of 1. So if we're counting it 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you'd say 1 and 2 and. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're playing along with a jam track, that you don't come in right away, you wait for the and of 1. All right, so 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and. Okay, after that I went another little follow up lick there. I went right back into that C chord shape that I showed you before, between the 5th fret 2nd string and the 3rd fret 1st string, and then back to that C note down there, which is your 1st fret 2nd string. Okay, so that's the intro. All right, so now the song actually starts, and this would be the verse. This would also be the looping point when you're playing along with a jam track and you loop back through. You're gonna never go back to that intro. That only happens once. Now you're gonna keep looping back to this point. Okay, so I come up to the 8th fret 2nd string, and then the 10th fret 2nd string, and I'll explain where these notes are coming from in a minute. We're going to play those 2 notes, and then we're going to do a half bend. So you're not doing a full bend, you're just playing 1 fret, or you're trying to hit the note that's 1 fret higher than where you're at. So that's that 11th fret that you're trying to hit. And then you release it back to the 8th fret. Now after that, I come down to the 8th fret 3rd string and hit that note, but push it sharp when I do. So what I could have played was, that would have been fine, but that sounds so Lily White. It sounds so Lawrence Welk to me or something. Just it doesn't have any soul. And so doing this one little thing by going, it gives it a whole different. Now you're playing with the blues. It went from being corny to being serious in my mind. Just that one little change, and so that's what's going on. We repeat it, and then I come down to the 10th fret 4th string. And so some of you are going, where are we at? Like, what are these notes connected to? Well, they're connected. Remember, we're playing over a C chord at this point. And so what I'm thinking about are my different options for playing a C chord. This is why caged is so important, that you really understand the different chord shapes and where they live on the neck. So you have your C chord here, but you've got just a C major bar chord there. That's where I bar in the 8th fret. So now this is the space that I'm playing within here. So I'm picturing this bar chord, and I'm thinking about, look at these notes that live right in that bar chord. So I've got my minor pentatonic scale, pattern 1, which is connected to that. But right in the middle of that, I have this overlap of the major pentatonic scale, pattern 2, which is here. Right? So you have pattern 1, which is down here, pattern 2. So pattern 2 of the major pentatonic scale and pattern 1 of the minor pentatonic scale overlap in this one little sweet spot. And I have a whole lesson on mixing the major and minor pentatonic scale, which is EP130. You can go back to that one as a reference to understand more about this. But that's what's going on there, and that's where what I'm thinking about is I'm thinking about that C chord shape. All right, now after that, I did this little jazzy walk down. It's kind of a western swing jazzy thing. And it's very simple to do. So when I play that last note there, which would be the 10th fret 4th string, I go ahead and put my middle finger down on the 9th fret 3rd string and my pinky down on the 10th fret 2nd string. And I'm playing strings 4, 3, and 2. Now I'm using a hybrid picking to do that, so I'm picking the 4th string and I'm using my ring finger and my middle finger to pluck strings 2 and 3. You could just brush it with your pick. It depends on the sound you're going for. And so I took that shape and slid it down 2 frets. Now what is that? Well, remember that's our C chord, right? So this little shape here, if I added one more note to that, if I added my pinky to the 8th fret 1st string, that would be your C6 chord. So we're playing a 6, or you're playing your major chord here, so that's your C chord, but this little 6 chord lives right within your major chord. And I want you to know that going forward. So when you like that jazzy kind of western swing, old Hank Williams sound, that's what a lot of that is these 6 chords. And learning the 6 chords in different positions. And we're going to learn them in this lesson. So that's what's going on there. But when you walk it down, so that's your 6 chord, when you walk it down 2 frets this way, it becomes your 9 chord. So C6 to the C9. And that happens anywhere. So you could go any of these shapes. It's anytime you're playing a 6 chord, you can always go 2 frets this direction and turn that 6 chord into the 9 chord of whatever chord you're playing. So in this case, it would be a C. So it would be a C6 to a C9. And the opposite is true. If you're playing a 9 chord, you can always go up 2 frets this direction and turn the 9 chord into a 6 chord. When I realized that, that was a game changer for me because I can now sound much more sophisticated than my head actually is, just by knowing these shapes and patterns and how they connect back to your chord shapes. Okay, so from then it goes to the 4 chord. And I could have went down and played the exact same thing over the F chord shape, right? I could have went. But what I wanted to do was introduce those same notes, but just in a different place. So we have. Now once we're down to here, I went. And what I'm doing there is I'm on the 4th string, 7th fret, and I'm sliding into that. And then I'm going to come up to the 5th fret 3rd string, and then back to the 7th fret, this time on the 3rd string. But I'm going to do a half bend, just like we did over that C. So it's not a full bend, we're just hitting the note that's 1 fret higher than where we start. And so it's just a little box there between the 5th fret and the 7th fret on the 4th string and the 3rd string. And I want you to think about that box in connection to the 4 chord, which is your F chord. And so the way that I think about that is this is going through your chord shapes, but I think about playing the F chord up here. And look at that box. It's right there off of that. So when I was thinking chords to play my leads out of, I was thinking C chord, F chord. Okay. And the way that I did it the second time goes. So it's a half bend again. They're on the 7th fret 3rd string. And then I come up here with my middle finger and play the 6th fret 2nd string. And then release it. And then back down to that 7th fret 4th string. Now what is this? Well, that's a note that's in the F chord, but it's also a note that's in major pentatonic scale pattern 4. So you can think about it either way. You can think about bending up to a note that just lives within the chord, or you can think about it as playing that major pentatonic scale pattern 4, which gives you a whole bunch of other notes that you could play in addition. But I don't want to overwhelm you with all of that. So just that's the lick. Then I landed there on the 5th fret 4th string. Let's back up from the very beginning, from the intro, and play us up to that point. And then we'll play over the 5 chord, and then that will give us everything for this lesson. So, for the first part of the lesson. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, then I followed that up with a 6 chord. This would be your C6 chord. And so the way that I played that was barring the first 4 strings on the 5th fret. And I played 4, 3, 2, 1. Now that sounds a little weird, but it actually sounds fine when you hear it in context with the jam track. And that's a C6 chord. Remember, I was just showing you the 6 chord here, walking it down to the 9 chord. So this is another way to play a 6 chord. A 6 chord, by the way, and this will blow your mind. This totally freaked me out when I realized this. But it's just the relative minor of whatever chord you're playing, played on top of that chord. So if we're playing in C, the relative minor for C is an A minor. The relative minor, to get there, you can always go down 1, 2, 3 frets from whatever note you're playing. So if that's a C note, you go down 1, 2, 3, and then play a minor chord. So that'd be your A minor. So look at this. What we just played, that's an A minor chord, right? If you have the A in the bass, it's definitely an A minor chord. But if you have the C in the bass, it's a C6 chord. So that's all a 6 chord is. It's just stacking the relative minor of that chord on top of it. That blew my mind when I realized that. It's simple, and I could get into probably the why behind it, but I'd have to think about it, so I'm not going to do it. But anyway, that's what a 6 chord is. Just whatever your relative minor. So now if you're ever just jamming and you can quit, and you know your relative minor chords, if you don't, you can kind of quickly work it out, work out the math. But you can throw in like a little jazzy sounding 6 chord just by knowing the relative minor of whatever that chord is that you're playing on. So then the song goes to the 5 chord. It's going to be a G chord. So I'm thinking about my G chord shape like this. And it's exactly the same concept as we did over the 1 chord, remember? Same thing. So it's going to be, because when you play a G chord, you'd be barring there on that 3rd fret. We're not going to play the chord, but that's just where my head is. So 3rd fret 2nd string to the 5th fret 2nd string. So I'm going to do a half bend on that 5th fret 2nd string. And then I'm going to come up here and hit the 3rd fret 1st string, which is your G note. And then I'm going to release that bend. So I'm holding the bend long enough to hit the 1st string and then come back to the bend. These are the next notes. So we're going to come down to the 3rd fret 2nd string, 5th fret 3rd string, middle finger goes down on the 4th fret 3rd string, ring finger goes down on the 5th fret 4th string. And I'm just picturing the notes in that G chord. There's that middle finger where that is, and there's where your 3rd fret 2nd string is. So those notes, I'm just tracing the notes out of that chord. That's why that note worked. And so I wasn't thinking about a scale at all. That never even entered my head. I was just thinking about that G chord and kind of tracing around the notes there in the chord. Now after I hit that, I did the same walk down back to the C. And just like we talked about in the intro, it's the same concept. They play the 5th, I'm sorry, starting on the 5th fret, but playing strings 2 and 4. Now here's another little sidebar, but instead of just playing those 2 strings, you could add your middle finger now to the 4th fret. In this case, it'd be the 4th fret 3rd string. And look at that. Now I'm playing the G6 chord, right? Walk it down to the G9 chord, and then to the C chord. Should be another big light bulb. So it's the same thing we just learned, but we're doing the 6 to the 9 chord, and then down to your back to your one chord, and it just they all flow together perfectly there. And that's why, instead of just playing a G chord to a C chord, that sounds so much better. And then I went, did that same little follow up to it. That's the whole part one, and I realize we've gone through a lot of information here, and hopefully I haven't like totally confused anybody. And leave me a comment. I always appreciate the comments on YouTube or on the Active Melody website, wherever you're seeing this. If you have questions about something, leave a comment. Or if you just like something, that's helpful too. It helps other people. And so a lot of this is just encouragement, and a lot of learning anything is just little wins. You just need to get something, like just a little win somewhere, and then you can play off of that and build off of that. Always keep that in mind when you're learning how to play an instrument. It's a lot of frustration, and I don't care how good you are or what instrument you're trying to play. It can really wear you down, and a lot of people just give up. But don't be that person. All right, let's back up from the beginning, and we'll play from the intro all the way through part one, and then I'll see you in part two. If you're a premium member, you can move on to part two. You can also download the tablature and get the MP3 jam tracks and all those extra goodies to help you really learn this. Okay, from the beginning then. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1.